Welcome to another video. I wanted to stop and share some of the fun and facts of how I built my craps practice table. When I first started researching and decided to begin practicing shooting the dice, I couldn't wait to jump right in and at least get moving. Being new to the philosophy of dice influencing or advanced shooting, I was completely shocked with even just a small amount of difference in my tracked practices were showing when I was just kneeling on the floor, pitching dice across the room into this cardboard receiving station. So it definitely motivated me to build my own practice table. So let me share the info that I found by researching around the internet and YouTube and what I put together for my own practice table. For the main frame, I used 2x4s. But you can also use 2x6s for more stability, and it gives you more surface area to bolt and connect the different pieces together. For the table legs, I used 2x6s, but you can probably even use 4x4s if you wanted it more heavy and sturdy. Reminder for those people like me who've been in the computer or electronic labs and haven't been in the wood shops for over a decade. I was surprisingly reminded that when stacking a 2x4 board on another 2x4 board, using a 3.5-inch screw will completely bust through the other side. What? I had forgotten that a 2-inch board is not actually 2 inches. So now I want to assemble the basic frame to the 4 legs. Now for my playing surface, I wanted to replicate a 14-foot craps table for my practice rig. I went with one of the high quality microfiber overlays, and it ran me about $200 for the 14-foot version. I'll list some of the places I bought from down below in the notes. Now, depending on how accurate you're trying to be, these dimensions are of the actual playable table surface area. So you may want your frame to be a little longer or a little wider so that the wooden frame will still be exposed and accessible so you can build your walls on it later. For the most part, the table surface will be sitting right on top of the cross beams and on the top of the legs. Basically 14 feet in length, but I'll show you some adjustments I ended up tweaking later on for my particular case. For the width, my searches have found that the table playing surface to be 44 inches wide, so I'm making the wooden cross sections the same size of 44 inches. Also to note, these 44-inch beams will be assembled on the inside when connected to the long frame boards. I found that the actual playing surface should be about 29 inches from the ground. So I'll discuss the actual table surface later, but its thickness should be about 3/4 inch to 1 inch thick. So I made my legs 28.5 inches tall, as the table surface will sit right on top of the legs. For additional stability of the frame and support holding up the table surface, I've added 2 more 44-inch cross beams, which are also mounted flush with the top of frame and legs, so the table surface can lay right on it. For the long beams, the common length you find at the hardware store of the boards are about 8 feet long. So if you're doing a 14-foot table, you can use 2 8-foot long beams and just cut them down to 7 feet each. But this will add a seam in the middle of each side. No problem. To connect these 2 beams as well as add more frame support, I've added 2 more legs in the middle of the long sides. This is also another reason why using 2x6s for the legs is better, so you have more surface area to connect the butt of the long beams to the face of one of the legs. So now your frame should be pretty solid. For your table surface, you'll want to buy some Birch Plywood. Birch is a little more expensive, but is more solid and, more importantly, has an extremely smooth surface. If you use a sheet of regular old plywood, your table surface will not be smooth and may have pits and knots in the wood, which will affect your dice when rolling across the table. So obviously, starting with a smooth surface is key here. If you end up cutting the birch plywood sheets in 2 pieces, since you probably won't find a 14-foot sheet, it's smart to have the seam where the 2 boards butt up together to also line up and sit on one of those middle legs or one of the cross beams. This will help keep the two different plywood pieces even with each other and prevent one from drooping or sagging after time, which will cause a bump all the way across the table surface when sliding your dice across the table. Another tip for when joining the two sheets, I used a couple small brackets underneath to hold them together, but also on the top side, I applied some duct tape all the way down the seam. This is to lessen any unevenness between the two levels of boards. When I was gathering info on tables, I'd see some people talking about bouncy versus hard surface tables, but it seemed very subjective since it varies from the action from casino to casino. So I had no idea what exactly was considered bouncy or not. So when acquiring my supplies for building a table, I picked up a roll of the same thin Velara 1/4 inch foam used on poker tables. I figured maybe that was what people meant for bouncy table. To adhere the material directly to the wood surface, I ended up using the 3M spray glue. So I then added a layer of this foam on the wood surface, trimmed the excess foam from the edges, and then excitingly laid out the cover and overlay to the top. I took a few practice tosses of the dice to test out the surface. Oh crap! That poker table foam was way too bouncy. Back to bare bones. I heard of a couple different theories that people had on what kind of material was most casino-like for the underlayer. Being the internet, there were definitely a few crazy ideas, but I decided to go with a single layer of regular felt that I bought from the fabric store. So I laid out a layer of felt to the table surface and wrapped it around the edges of the plywood surface so I can pull it tight and staple around the edges. I then put the overlay back on the table, pulling tight and stapling around the edges again. This surface combination seemed to compare quite nicely, not too bouncy, but not too hard. Now, like I mentioned before, along the long sides of the table, the 2x4 frame is still exposed, and I'll also screw in a few more support beams to add thickness so that I can just set and mount the walls, these long boxes, to the wood frame, but not having the wall pieces sitting on top of the actual playing surface at all. I want to be able to pop out the tabletop if I need access to replacing the surface cover or whatever without having to disassemble everything. A while ago, I had acquired these sturdy, long wooden boxes used as heavy-duty shelving with cool white laminate from a local JCPenney store that was going out of business. So now, I figured they'd work out nicely for the walls of my practice table. Basically, from the top of the table surface, I found the height of the walls to be about 13 inches, including the chip rack and padding. So I've cut my sidewall boxes to be 11 inches above the table surface, which is actually 12 inches since my boxes will be sitting directly on the 2x4 frames. So I compensate for the thickness of the 3/4 inch or 1 inch tabletop. At 11 inches tall, this gives me the option to later add a nice 2-inch foam padding, railing, or even a chip rack to the top of the walls. But since my intention is just a practice table, and I won't have anyone standing around the receiving side of the table end, I'll just leave it clean and bare for now. You do not want to go any less than 11 inches tall for the walls at the receiving side or sides, because when you add the rubber alligator, diamond, pyramid bumpers, whatever you want to call, they are 11 by 47 inches. So the wall should be taller than 11, but no taller than about 13 inches from the table surface. I decided to go with using 2 sheets of the pyramid bumpers to be able to wrap around the hook of the table and still run about 31 inches down the 2 side walls. It would seem like an unrealistic practice table to me if my dice happened to bounce to the sides and just hit hard, flat walls. Keep in mind though, for just 1 sheet of the pyramid bumpers, it'll run about $50. So keep that in mind if you're building a full table with bumpers on both ends. I also had to cut some extra foam material to fill in the curved area in the corners to still give a solid support to the bumpers. Now, for some of you that have watched my videos may be thinking, hey, your overlay and cover does not fit perfectly like your diagram for a 14-foot table layout. And yes, you would be right. I deviated a few aspects with these goals and facts in mind. First, I wanted to learn and practice from a main spot, ideally about 1 to 3 spots left of the stickman, and on a full-size table, so anywhere around 9 or 10 feet from the back wall. And second, my room here is only 12 feet wide, and I wanted enough space to be able to move around the table as well as set up a tripod for cameras. So I basically eliminated the last 4 feet from just the left end of the table, so basically a 10-foot footprint, but still equal distance from the right wall on a full-length 14-foot table. Plus, I can still move around to the other side of the left dealer spot to practice shooting a fake stickman right position. But now, you might ask, what about the extra 4 feet of overlaying cover? So in actuality, the playing field looks more like this. But anyway, then I just finished off the dealer areas with some shorter panels. I made sure to build the main shooting position with the taller walls again, and still unsure if I'll ever add the additional padded railing or not. I decided to completely leave the far left edge open so that I can get better and lower angles for cameras. So that's pretty much how my craps practice table looks. Now, I just add a few cameras and occasionally a cute guest dealer or shooter, and that's my DIY rig. Thanks for checking out my videos, and I'll see you at the tables.